All right, everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us for a discussion about how photographers get into advertising photography early in their careers. My name is Connor Risch. I am a member of the PhotoPlus staff, and I am also the editor of The 30, which, for those who don't know, is an annual program that celebrates the work of early career photographers. The three photographers with us today are part of the 2020 edition of The 30. And if you haven't had a chance yet, I would encourage you to take a look at the gallery and profiles of the photographers, which you can find at the30photographers.com. There's also a link on the 30 profile here in PhotoPlus+, so you can also check it out that way. So I'm really excited to have these three photographers here to speak about their different paths into advertising photography, because each of them have what I think are pretty unique perspectives to one another. So Cheyenne learned a lot through assisting, it sounds like, and he'll talk a little bit more about that. Kelsey has had a really interesting path because she's worked in-house for a couple of brands. And Lawrence has parlayed their personal fine artwork into advertising jobs that really reflect their personal work and aesthetic, which I think is fascinating as well. So you're going to get three, I think, pretty different perspectives on getting into advertising work from these three photographers. So just to talk a little bit about how we're going to do things, we're going to run through some of their work, and they'll just talk through it, how they got the jobs, and just kind of how they've approached getting advertising work early in their careers. And we're going to do that in alphabetical order. And then at the end, we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into treatments, writing treatments and creative calls. We've got some treatments that were shared with us that we're going to be able to look at, as well as the finished ads that resulted from those treatments. So I think that'll be really fascinating. With regards to audience questions, please feel free to interject if you have something that's relevant to something that's being said, and we'll try and slip those in. If you have more general questions, we are going to leave some time to take those at the end. So with all of that said, welcome everyone. Welcome Cheyenne, Kelsey, and Lawrence. Thank you three for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to talking through some of your work with you. Cheyenne, if we could start with you.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, maybe just a quick introduction, where you are, where you're from.
Yeah, I was born in Iran, raised in Texas, and I've been in LA for the past 9 years now. And in the photo world, I think for about 6.5 years, going on 7.
Great. And you mentioned in your interview for the 30 that you I think the quote was, you received a graduate education in photography without the student debt, which I loved.
Hell yeah.
And it sounded like a lot of that education was through assisting. So I was wondering if you could start a little bit just by, talking about what assisting kind of helped you figure out, especially as that relates to commercial work. And then we'll get into
absolutely
your stuff.
So I used to be a PA. I studied documentary filmmaking at the University of Texas. And then when I moved out to LA, I thought, okay, I'm going to do LA for a little bit, then move to New York because it's more of a doc town. But I got, stuck in just PAing for about 2 years, 2.5 years. And I realized like it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. And I met a photographer on a shoot. And when I was talking with him and asking about lighting, I essentially, which is in the interview, offered to work for him for free and then go into Milk Studios. And I became an intern in the Q office under Ali. And from there, it was just, I started PAing for photo productions instead of video productions. And from there it was always about meeting the photo assistants and the photographers on those shoots and telling them, hey, if you ever need a hand, even if it's free, like I just want to learn. So from there, we ran the gamut in terms of photographers, a lot of fashion photographers, a lot of portrait photographers, some still life, some lifestyle. And in doing that, I learned a multitude of things. Obviously, lighting, different lighting styles, because I knew very little about lighting. barely knew how to set up a C-stand. And then I also paid very close attention to how they interacted with clients. And that's one thing that I feel like a lot of university programs, at least the ones that I like when I speak with my friends who have done photo, or even us who have done film, is we don't come out with a sense of the business very much. And I think that's a great disservice to the students that are paying however much they're paying for those educations. But yeah, it was a crash course in all of it, and just being a sponge to it, so that when, now when I work with my assistants, I can express what it is I want, and trust them to do it. But at the same time, I also, in that process, witness how the client, what is it that the clients want from the photographer? How is the photographer talking to them? What are they maneuvering? Like, I remember I used to assist Francesco Carazzini, and he, when a client would be like, oh, we're going to add 15 more shots to our shoot day, that they didn't initially talk about, I learned from him is like, oh, how do you deal with that when it's on the go and you want more money for that, because you're owed that money? It's not like they can just keep tacking stuff on. But yeah, that's what I would say when it comes to that whole graduate degree without having the debt.
Right. That makes sense. So it sounds like assisting for people who maybe have their eye on a career in advertising photography is a path you would recommend potentially.
Wholeheartedly. Yeah. But it's incumbent on you as a photographer. And I've told this to a lot of my, I've had a couple interns. I tell them this all the time, or anyone who's aspiring to become a photographer. I say, look, we don't have this just like this ladder that we work our way up, right? Nobody gives a shit if I was like first assistant to whatever big name photographer. It doesn't mean that once that photographer or like that client is like, okay, you've done it for X amount of time, here's a campaign for you, or here's an editorial. What I learned quickly was, unless I start creating content, and keep putting it out there and show some sort of consistency, show some sort of growth while maintaining a sense of consistency, I will not get hired for those jobs that I want. So, I work with some photo assistants they love doing that. That's what they want to do. And I rely on them so goddamn heavily. I adore them. But then I've also met a lot of photo assistants or photo, world people who talk about, oh, I'm gonna finally do this, or I'm gonna pay my dues for like 5 years and then become an official photographer. And what I tell to everyone that asks for advice or is coming up, I'm like, paying your dues is not necessarily, there's no time frame for it. It's truly incumbent on you to take control and build relationship, because no one else is going to hand it to you, unless of course like you come from mad money, or or there's nepotism. But I moved here from Texas and didn't know anybody in the business.
Right.
Please.
Yeah, sorry. It sounds like we're having a little trouble with your video feed.
Is it better now?
Yeah, it's better now. So let's maybe try and move on, and
yeah.
If it keeps going, if we keep struggling with it, we'll figure that out. So let's move through some of this work that you shared with us.
Yeah, I appreciate you. So do you want me to talk about it as you put them up?
Yeah, go ahead and just talk. Yeah, just to talk through them quickly. And
sure. So this was we had done 4 covers for T Magazine's. It was a December issue, and I think that was in 2018.
Okay.
But I went out to Brooklyn to photograph it, and it was 30 something. It's honestly one of the most memorable shoots of my life, and I think one of the most important. But it was 30 something of the most important Black male writers of our time And that was Boots Riley was the creative director on that shoot. That's one of the covers, but there's 4 total. And this actually kind of veered, I guess, in talk. Well, like, I'm a very and I shy away from them, which the kinds of clients that want moments. It's like, yeah, because we came into the shoot because of political leaning.
Cheyenne, I'm gonna have to interrupt you because Cheyenne, we're gonna have to interrupt you because I think the audio and video is struggling a little bit on it seems like on your end. Maybe if you wanted to try and
let me see. Let me change it. Give me a second.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
In the meantime, maybe we'll come back to you and we'll just jump ahead to Kelsey's slides if that's all right. I think we're just going to take that as a yes. So let me just quickly get through these. It's always something with that. All right, there you are, Kelsey.
Hello.
Hello. So we're going to look through some of your work as well, and it's primarily ad work. But
Am I back in?
You are. We're going to move on to Kelsey for the moment. We'll come back to you. Is that all right, Cheyenne?
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So we'll get back to you though, Cheyenne. Kelsey.
Yeah.
I think your career path is interesting because you started out sort of as an in-house photographer at a brand, and then you've done in-house work since you moved from. You started out in Ohio and moved to San Francisco. So I was just curious how working in-house has influenced sort of your knowledge of advertising photography and how you approach it as, when you're working with clients as a freelancer.
Yeah, they're very, very different. Working in-house is like, you kind of find out what you have to do the day you do it and you just, get the work done. But advertising, I feel like it's, a month in preparation before you do a shoot, and there's like a lot more people involved. So the nice thing about being in-house was I was pretty independent, and I got a lot of freedom to just like try things and learn while I worked. Like it's a lot low pressure, so that's the biggest difference. But it was still consistent paying job, which is what I needed. So yeah.
Right. Did it help to, I think maybe one of the challenging things, especially when you're starting out as a photographer, is to, develop a portfolio and get things in your book that, art buyer or creative director are going to be able to look at and say, oh yeah, this is someone who can shoot ads for us. Did working in-house and having sort of that creative freedom help you start to build your book in that way?
Yes and no. I mean, I didn't put I guess, yeah, at first, yes, my first portfolio was pretty much all in-house work that I did for Jenny's, the ice cream company. And then also some personal work I'd done at the same time. So it mostly helped kind of figure out my style and just like how I wanted things to look. But then eventually it became like all the work I did in-house was stuff I didn't show anyone. Like I just it was like a day job, and then I did all my own personal work. But it definitely started from the in-house position. Since like in Ohio, there weren't as many photographers to assist. And even when I moved here, I had a really hard time like meeting photographers that were willing to take somebody with no experience assisting or even with any photo work. So I would ask people and then they would just kind of be like, yeah, I'll keep you in mind, but it didn't go anywhere. So I just had to keep doing my own thing and trying to show it to people. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to look through some of your ad work, and if you want to just kind of talk us through these, that would be great.
Yeah, so this was for Converse. Their toy collection, I think in 2018. This was one of my first commercial jobs that I did with my styling partner, Michelle McGuire. So they contacted both of us and said, we want you guys to work together on this shoot. We want it to look like it's in an art gallery. But we were like trying to take inspiration from the shoes and the colors and things. And this was my first experience, like, I think, you know, not knowing how much you're supposed to take on yourself as a photographer. Like, I did all the like set building plans and things, and like now I know like you can hire somebody to like help you do that stuff. You don't have to be like, oh, I need this to be 4 feet by 4 feet and I need it built here. So like we just like took on so much ourselves. But I guess it was good to learn that way. And it was really fun to like go to New York for it. And like go to fabric stores and play with things. And this was also the first time I had to do photo and video. And it was like a ton of shots in a day and then like 4 or 5 videos. So we hired a friend to DP the video, and then we just kind of like directed the lighting a little bit with them, and the motions.
Yeah, it brings up, and we're going to look at some more motion work of yours here. But I did want to ask, I know you work with the stylist and you've got a creative partnership that's going on. How did the client find you? Do you know?
I don't actually know. I don't know if I asked them. It was after we did that personal series wardrobe snacks. So that's kind of the thing that like, you know, made my career take off, I guess, because so many people saw it on Pinterest and like it's been pinned like 2 million times. So if people happen to see my name on it, then that's how they find me, I guess.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's usually that, or like through Instagram, and they just write asking if we could do it. And it's really cool when they say like, they were like one client that's actually addressed us as Terrence Caviar, which is like this fake name we made up.
Right.
It just like confuses people most of the time, but it's really funny when people use it.
Right. Yeah, so speaking of motion work, do you want to talk a little bit about these?
Yeah, these are GIFs for Zappos. It was like their shop by emoji feature. So like if you went onto their app, you could type in an emoji and it would pull up any, like if you put in snakes, it would pull up all the snakes stuff. And again,
got one more of these, yeah.
Yeah, like slight wardrobe snacks influence where it's like they don't want faces. Like I don't think I had photographed anyone's face for like 2 years, and I was like, I need to get some faces in here now. I'm like way too familiar with only torsos. So yeah, but this one was really fun because it was just, again, like me and Michelle and then the art director working with us. So we had a lot of freedom.
Do you, I was going to ask with regard to the motion content, how frequently, and Lawrence and Cheyenne, you could jump in here too, because I'm curious about your perspective, but like how frequently is there a motion component attached to the jobs you're doing?
Very frequently.
Yeah.
Like almost every time now.
Almost every time. And is it this sort of thing where there's just a moving element that's probably going to go on social, or is it a full blown, you know, video?
For me, it starts out as them asking for a full blown video, and then you have to explain that that's a like much different production that's more expensive and just, you know, more complicated. So then you end up saying, well, what I can do is like stop motion. But you know, it's fun to think of working with video too.
Lawrence, Cheyenne, has that been your experience as well with the ad work that you've done? Is there a motion component usually when you're getting called for jobs?
Yeah, it's coming up more and more, which I like because it's taking me back to what I studied. But for me, it's mainly kind of been in the vein of like docu style interviews, which are not that far from what my portraiture is. And I love that. When you look at like Errol Morris's work, yeah, he does a lot of like commercials where it's just a person talking in front of a white backdrop. That's what it's like for me right now.
Lawrence, how about you?
I honestly don't do a lot of video.
Okay. Yeah.
I want to get more into like full-blown directing and DPing, but I've never done like a GIF or anything like that. Honestly, just because I'm like not tech savvy, so I'm just like, I don't know how to do that. But I do sometimes make like, I guess I get hired for video jobs and then photo jobs separately. For the most part, the one that I'm gonna show treatment of, I did do some video for, but it's, I would say like maybe a quarter of the time I'll do a bit of video, but it's not the main focus of the work I do for sure.
And actually, this is a good question that I'll just pepper in here. Tracy Iglesias is asking how when you're being asked to add video to a shoot, how do you think about pricing that? I think Kelsey, you touched on it a little bit when people are asking for maybe productions that they don't really have the budget for. So how do you like? Is that a tough thing to sort out?
No, I mean, it depends on, I guess, if you're hiring a DP, like somebody else to shoot it, or if you're trying to take it on yourself. I feel more comfortable hiring somebody else who's just like more comfortable with the cameras and that side of things than I am. Like I could be there for the vision or whatever art direction, but like I would trust somebody else with the camera. So it's pretty collaborative where you just have to like find that DP and ask them what their rates would be for the project. And then it's also, it's the same as photo and figuring out like, oh, well, this is how much the gear rental is for the video lights versus like my strobes and whatnot. So yeah, I don't think it's uncomfortable. Yeah. You just have to say like, well, there's more people involved, or it's just a bigger production. So these are the numbers.
Yeah. Okay. So just turning to outside help when you're bidding on that stuff. Yeah, that makes sense. So Kelsey, what are we looking at now?
This is for Chipotle, actually. Maybe 2 years ago, last year. It was just for like a short Earth Day campaign they did about how they recycle their gloves that are used in the stores, or they recycle the trash bag or gloves into trash bags or something like that. Sorry, I don't totally remember. But they just break down the plastic into these like pellets, and then they can reform the plastic into other things. So it's like a closed loop system instead of trashing it.
Oh, cool.
So it was fun. They just sent me to this recycling plant that was nearby, like an hour away, to photograph the process. So that was fun.
Nice.
And this was for Bikini Berlin, which is a mall in Berlin. Another wardrobe snacks thing. And I think the last one I've done that was wardrobe snacks inspired. But it felt like a nice kind of elevation of it since there's more environment. We shot it in the mall, like in the food court, using food from the food court. And then we also shopped in the mall for all the outfits. So it was like, what's that show where it's like the grocery store and you're buying stuff really frantically?
Supermarket sweep, is that what it's called?
It's like supermarket sweep, but like through a mall for like all the clothing, like, and we were like really jet lagged, so, and we had like 24 hours to shop for 6 outfits and then do like the fittings of the models, and it was really fun. We worked with an agency on that one, and they were like all super cool.
Here's another one from that.
Could speak 5 languages. And
so it brings up an interesting, you've mentioned wardrobe snacks a couple of times, which I'm gathering is a series that you worked on with Terrence Caviar, with your partner. And you mentioned Pinterest. We've had a couple of questions about how you marketed yourself as a photographer when you first went freelance. And I feel like that question kind of ties into all of this. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that briefly.
Yeah, Michelle and I make a print promo once a year usually, and we send it out to editors or like agencies and anyone we actually have contact info for. This year's been weird because people aren't in offices, so you like can't just send stuff to people. But I think most of my marketing is just through Instagram and like hoping people see it, hoping it like picks up. Like Wardrobe Snacks was so nice because it just like went everywhere, so everyone saw it without me having to do anything. So that's nice. That's
yeah, for sure.
best method.
Okay, we just have a couple more to look through here from you. It's another GIF.
Yeah, it's another Zappos one, which was like you could call their customer service and hit number 5, and it would tell you it's a really stupid joke. So that's what this was.
Nice.
And this was for a whiskey company in San Francisco. It's like not made in a barrel. It's like lab whiskey. And Michelle and I worked with an art director, like freelance art director for them with this. So this was one of like the first times where it was very like not just exactly what I wanted to do and what Michelle wanted to do. Like it was a little more like collaborative to listening to what the client wanted, which is, you know, good to do, a good exercise.
Yeah, these are really beautiful.
Yeah, and we worked with like a mixologist who like made the drinks and stuff. And all the lab utensils are fun.
Okay, sorry. More GIF work here.
Yeah. So this was for Kava. I've never been to one, but they're like a Mediterranean food place, and this was specifically for their Colorado market because they were opening a bunch of stores there. So I actually shot this like March 11th, and then the stay in place stuff happened, and it's crazy.
Snuck it in, right?
Yeah.
And then we just got a couple here. I think it's an example of how an ad turned out, right?
Yeah, so this was for Haagen-Dazs in like February of this year. So this one was fun because it was kind of confusing. It was like through two agencies working together, and my rep, they had contacted my rep, and they just kind of had like a rough idea of what they wanted the ad to be. Like they wanted this script and like this like delicious chocolate, but they were like, why don't you sketch us like your ideas, like how would you approach this general concept? And I was kind of like, oh, I don't think I would ever like actually get this job because I don't have like a ton of work that looks like this, but they liked my sketches and they wanted to go with this direction, so that was really cool, that like, you know, to see your just doodle translated into an ad. And it's, you know, surprising when people like it sometimes, you know.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, I think it brings up a couple of questions, which is, you know, one of them is, I think a lot of times people feel that you can't get hired from something that a client doesn't really like see evidence of in your book. Like if you don't already have a picture that looks like something they're thinking about, then they're probably not going to hire you. Does that still hold true? I mean, that's something I heard.
Yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a trust thing. Like if they like, you know, if they see something in your work that makes them think like, oh, she can translate this to this medium, fine. And just like if you have a good enough idea and you care about it enough, I think people can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and having a good team helps. Like worked with a really good food stylist on this. Does like incredible things with ice cream and like vats of chocolate. So
nice.
Yeah.
Right. If you can say, oh, I've got this person working with me who's amazing at this, then that helps, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like finding like the best team to help lift you up. Like, you know, you need that in every sense, like in digital tech and assistance and, you know, all of that.
All right. Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.
Cheyenne, we'll get back to you, but I'm just going to, since we're already here, I'm going to move into Lawrence's slides. So Lawrence, I'd love it if you just introduce yourself a little bit, where you are, what you're doing.
Cool, yeah. Hi, I'm Nahas, and I'm a photographer in Montreal, Canada. And I do kind of a lot of different things. I guess my main practice is these days more as like a fine art photographer, and then who happens to make commercial work for a living, and kind of finding ways to use commercial work to support my artistic practice, and like finding ways for them to feed into each other, if that makes sense. But I do a lot of autobiographical work, self-portrait work, and work looking at my own community as a queer and trans person. And I do really colorful work. I think that's kind of like what keeps it all together in one nice package, is the color.
Great. So we've got some, you sent some personal work, and that's a good transition. So maybe we can just look through these so people can get a sense of, yeah, go ahead.
So these images are from my ongoing project Puberty, which is a 2-year long, long form autobiographical project where I'm looking at myself and my day-to-day life as I undergo hormonal replacement therapy as a trans person. And so it's kind of like giving space for those really mundane moments and kind of giving into a window into what transition looks like on the day-to-day. And it's been interesting to me because when I started this project, this is a self-portrait on my 2-year anniversary of testosterone. When I started this project, to me, it was very much just like a personal thing. I didn't think there would be any interest in it, even as art. And then I started posting it and getting really positive feedback. And then it's kind of like led to a lot of commercial work, which is really interesting, that I can create work that kind of fits in the project in a weird way. And I feel like it's, I don't know, there's like lots of layers to it that excite me about kind of talking about capitalism and talking about like making money off of art within the art practice itself. But yeah, anyway, so these are some moments from that project. That's like mostly what I've been working on these days, is this kind of 24/7. I'm working on a book of it. And then I also try to find commercial work that can fit into it, and then also publish it and have exhibitions of it and stuff like that. But all of the ones that you've shown so far are ones that I photographed in April and March, like right when quarantine started. So the project was already a lot about looking at domesticity and kind of the mundane moments of everyday life. And it just kind of got like accelerated when quarantine happened, because that was something that was reflecting an experience that a lot of us collectively were having, of really like returning to the interior. This is an image from another project of mine called Lucky, which is a 10-year long kind of collaborative project with my best friend Lucky, who is a Latinx intersex trauma survivor, and kind of looking at different intersections of identity and how they evolve over time. And this was shot for a magazine, and this was kind of like in quarantine, like at home photo shoot also. So that was like in our living room. And yeah.
So I wanted to, so I think we're going to get into looking at some of the ad work you've created. But maybe before we, or as we're looking at it, I was just curious. So how did you figure out how to approach, having this really a lot of it's highly personal work, a self-portrait series. How did you learn how to approach translating that into the ad world? Like, seems like it might be a difficult thing to do.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that I actually went to a commercial photo program in college. So here in Canada, we have kind of a different system where we have high school and then college and then university. So I did commercial photography in college, and the whole time I was kind of like, was always wanting to approach photography from a more fine art perspective, and that I was clashing a lot with the program that I was in, because what I was doing was like never commercial enough. And then now I find myself like actually being a commercial photographer, which I think is really interesting. But I think for me, it's always been that approach of like, whatever it is that I'm doing, like this is an image I shot for Airbnb. And, they told me like, okay, we're doing this swimming like a mermaid experience. And, we want you to cast like who your friends are, because they've seen that that's the kind of work that I do. So then as a result of that, I get to, instead of casting models and kind of strangers, like I get to cast my friends and kind of uplift my community. And this is a photographer. Her name is Mallory Lowe, and she's like a really amazing photographer in Montreal. So I just reached out to her. I'm like, hey, do you want to be in this campaign? And then some of these people are like some of my closest friends, and I was like, let's just have a fun day and do that. But I think kind of to answer that your question, like the way that I've done it is just consistently publish my personal work and self-publish it a lot, to a point where it's kind of like that's what clients will see and that's what editors will see, and then they'll hire me for like making that kind of stuff too, which is really nice. Like it puts me in a very kind of niche place where I'm like, this is very much my style, and like you're gonna hire me for that style, but it works for me because I get to do what I love. This was shot for Beats by Dre, and it was once again one of those things where like they're seeing my self-portrait work and they're looking for ways to kind of integrate the product in it. So I'm like listening to the Beats pill and with my cat in my bed, and like this is like an actual representation of what I do every night. So it's kind of like glamorizing those little moments and stuff. But yeah, it's honestly just from sharing my work and having people be receptive to it and kind of like developing a style over time. This was shot for Away, the suitcase company, and they sent me to Mexico City to photograph the kind of dance hall scene, which was super interesting because it's not at all something that I would have gone into on my own, because I'm just like, I stay at home literally every day of my life, even before quarantine. So this actually we did in February, like right before quarantine hit. So it's very dear to my heart that I got to like go to Mexico and just like explore places that were new to me and have that like sunlight before quarantine.
Right.
Okay, this one is I shot for the L Word, the new season of the L Word. It was a promo for it. Once again, it was something where I was working with this company and they were kind of pitching artists to Showtime and kind of showing different core artists, and then we had to make a pitch of like, okay, how would we make artwork about, you know, the new season of the L Word? And I submitted like 3 different ideas, and then we went for this one, which was Queer Joy, and just kind of showing different people of different queer identities, just having a good time and being colorful. Yeah,
that's
and
great.
kind of going into older work I was doing, which was mostly studio work, and now I've kind of moved away from that. But yeah.
Laurence, Felinda Roy is asking a question here, and you mentioned sharing work. So where have you shared your work? And I know it seems like a lot of it is getting shared on Instagram. Are there other places that you're sharing it as well?
Yeah, I feel like for me it's been about kind of like following where I'm feeling like the people are, if that makes sense. So I started out on Flickr back in like 2007, and that's where photography was happening at the time, and that's how I found a lot of initial community in photography. And just it was like at a much less professional level, and it was literally just like, I'm doing this after school, like I'm in high school and I'm enjoying it and kind of getting to share that passion. And then it moved on to Tumblr after, from like I want to say like 2010 to 2013, that's where it was happening. So then I was a lot on Tumblr, and then Tumblr started dying down, and then kind of moved to Instagram, and I feel like it's been there ever since. But I mostly just do Instagram, and then I'll have people like sometimes follow me and they'll be like, oh my god, I just found you again, I was following you on Flickr like 10 years ago. So like it all adds up, you know.
Yeah. And have you have people approached you about work? Like is Instagram kind of the main place that you feel like people find your work?
I would say Instagram, yes, and now like more and more also from other work that I've done, or from things like this, or like maybe like a scholarship I won, or things like that, just kind of word of mouth. But I would say like yeah, most people find me through Instagram.
Okay, Cheyenne, let's go back to your, sorry, I'm going to flip through here, folks. We're going to just go back in time. We'll try this again.
Can I also just say how amazing y'all are? Your work, it's so goddamn killer.
That's great. It's good to have that that support. So Cheyenne, I want to make sure that we're leaving some time for audience questions and also to check in on the treatment stuff. So I'm going to move through sort of the earlier slides here a little bit quickly, but just, you know, tell us why you wanted to share these.
No, for sure. I tend to, I've been getting more work. So part of the reason why I want to share this one is I've been getting more work based on what my voice is in terms of social issues. Like Families Belong Together. We did the campaign for I Stand With Immigrants. And yeah, Uh, but I also, I mean, if you want to go to the next slide,
Sure.
feel free to. Like this kind of is in line with that. This is a personal project that I did because I'm a big dog person, a mega animal person in general. But I'm very passionate about animal rescue, specifically dog rescue, like this guy here. But this is a project at California City Correctional Facility where dogs live with inmates for several weeks, and they come from all over. They can be very scared. But it's a mutual rehabilitation thing. The way it affects the inmates and the way it affects dogs. It's such a beautiful thing in a criminal justice system that needs massive overhaul. But this is the kind of work that does bring in what I consider to be, at the end of the day, we need the money, we want the money. But when you're doing it on a project where whether or not, like sometimes we do it and it's just for the purpose of doing the job and putting that kind of like work out there that matters. But it's nice to get paid for it as well. This is for ESPN magazine. I think Chris LaManna called me. And this isn't, obviously it's editorial stuff, but I'm a guy that gets hired for just very straight portraiture typically. And this is the kind of work, like we talked about this, and it's everyone's got their own path, but for me, any advertising work has either come from personal projects like the prison stuff or my animal portraits specifically, but also this kind of thing.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I was going to ask you about is, when you've done editorial portraiture, like I'm curious about that transition from editorial work to commercial work. And it maybe if you're being hired to make portraits, that's a little bit easier of a transition to make. But there's a step up in production value, obviously. So I was curious,
Absolutely.
how that went for you, and how you sort of let clients know that you could make that step up in production value.
The truth is, I'm still doing it. I'm still in the process of becoming more of an advertising photographer, because living in California, living in LA, it's like you want to buy a house, you have to shoot advertising, otherwise you're screwed. But not just that, like I actually enjoy it. But it's you asked recent, I think you were speaking with Kelsey about how people, like how they trust you when she did the Haagen-Dazs ad. How do people look at that? Like I've been trying to do key artwork for a considerable amount of time, like movie posters, things of that nature. And the joke always is that, there's like a couple like massive names right now and they take over that world predominantly. But it is a bit of a weird thing. It's like it's same as the catch-22 of celebrity shooting. It's like, how can you start shooting celebrities if you don't have celebrities in your book? And that fortunately is changing now. People are just like, they trust your vision, they like it, and that's how we all do it. It's just getting in front of the right people. But now I am focusing a lot of that energy on advertising targeting, the way that I did with editorial, like constantly putting it out there, constantly sending it out to different ad agencies that I've become friends with over the years. People that I became friends with back when I was a PA, and just reminding them that I exist and this is the work that I do. But like recently I did an Amazon Studios key art for a show that's not out yet, if I'm not mistaken. And that was because they wanted someone that could photograph dogs as well as humans. And I think, so somebody at one of my friends at Bauer Fine Productions recommended me, and that's how that happened.
Cool.
Charles Bradley. We shot that in Times Square. It was like random. Got a phone call from my friend who's directing their music video, Jesse English and Eric Feigenbaum. And this work is actually, we had a couple, like not lawsuits, but like I had August go after their camp, which is my syndication agents, because this image ended up being used on a lot of merchandise and a lot of internet and things. Like people were sending me photos of people wearing his face on a shirt, which was my photo. So that's another one of those things, like a quick word to anyone who's a photographer or aspiring or whatever, put your work through the National Library of Congress and make sure that you don't get screwed over financially.
Right. Good tip.
This was for Hollywood Reporter. And again, so part of the reason I'm not at that level, like obviously I'm not at the level of people that I would like Art Schreiber, Frank Ockenfeld. Good luck, Cheyenne. Not happening. But like this is the kind of work that I put out there to try to appeal more to some of these art directors, art buyers that are in that key art poster world where they can have a little bit more fun. Like Gad is a famous French comedian, and he did a show on Netflix, I believe, called Famous in France, where he moved to New York and nobody knows him anymore. So we were playing this off the whole like all American French fries burger, but then smoking it like a Frenchman.
Great.
This is my friend Paula Mendoza. She that was actually on the border of Juarez and El Paso, but we're on the El Paso side. So we went down to Juarez for Families Belong Together. We stayed in El Paso, and Cory Booker came with us to go into Juarez, and we met with families that are seeking asylum in the United States. So they come in, they go through that hellish process of being detained at the border facilities. Then they get kicked out and are told you have a court date to come back in. And this is what I tell people all the time, because I used to be told all the time, like, hey, like certain things, maybe don't talk about your political leanings. You're going to lose certain clients. You're going to lose magazine opportunities. At the end of the day, do I give a shit if I ever photograph Donald Trump? No, I don't want to, you know, like, I think it's important to stick true to your values. And if that costs you a couple $1,000, if that costs you a paycheck somewhere, to me, it's worth losing that. As long as I can do jobs like that with Paula and people that truly give a damn about other human beings, like that feels good.
Yeah. You got to represent your values.
Absolutely. This is Jodie Comer, who I love. The Killing Eve is amazing. But yeah, Jodie, we shot for, this is for Variety. And again, this is just in that world of keep putting portraits out there, especially with celebrity work, which is, you know, living in LA, that's the bulk of what I do, because I also went into portraiture. These are the kinds of things that I keep putting out there and hoping, like, if we keep doing it, people keep seeing it, maybe somebody will finally see a portrait and be like, okay, I don't see all the design work that goes with that poster, but I see what you can get out of a human being. And hopefully that's the kind of thing that'll translate to more of that work.
Right.
So this is the animal stuff that I was talking about. This it's funny because I do this purely because I enjoy doing it. I wanted to kind of remove the separation of animals and humans, in the sense of like looking at an animal, we oftentimes will think of as a thing, you know, just another whatever. But what I want to do with these portraits was capture personality in them so that you look at it and you look at it the same way that I look at human portraits. Mm-hmm. But because of that, like I had shot this pig, which is actually right there. That pig I had photographed, and it was Ellen Bennett's pig. And she's the one that hired me. She and Casey, her partner, hired me to do the Headley and Bennett campaign. So it was photographing their pig and then meeting them, because I found them on Instagram, meeting them and then having them just say, hey, we've got this campaign, can you do it? Which I think is maybe the next slide.
Yeah.
So this is the Headley and Bennett campaign when they make aprons. The idea behind this was OG chefs. So when Ellen began the company and started marketing it, these were all the chefs, who a lot of them are on big Food Network shows and have very well known restaurants around the LA area. And we were photographing them with their first like Headley and Bennett apron alongside another one.
Oh, cool.
That's Evan Funky of Felix. And yeah, so this is the kind of work that I like. To me, it actually doesn't feel like work. It's what I love doing. It's connecting with human beings in whatever short time frame we have, and then getting paid better for it.
That's great. So I want to move quickly into talking a bit about treatments. So this is going to be a little, sorry for the, I hope nobody has a seizure or anything for me flipping so fast through these. Oh, here we go. Okay, so Laurence, maybe just starting with you, because yours is up here. Just going to look at a couple of pages from a treatment, and then an image from the finished campaign that I feel like is represented in the treatment. But before we, or as we're looking through it, I'd love to just hear, how did you figure out how to write treatments? Was that something you learned in school? Did you reach out to other photographers?
Well, I definitely did not learn about treatments in school. And I think I feel like I'm starting to get the hang of them, honestly. Like, it's definitely always a work in progress, and I'm a perfectionist, and I wish I could make them like fancier. But I work with this agency called Adolescent, and they're a LA-based ad agency that focus on like for youth by youth content. And so they represent me in most of my advertising work I get through them, like about half of it I get through them. And so for this specific campaign, it was a new CBD skincare company, and they were kind of doing like a massive marketing launch. And so they were working with a lot of different creators using their product, and it came out around the start of the pandemic. And so they kind of pivoted the campaign around looking at self-care from the home perspective, and looking at kind of like making your home a cozy space and all of that. And so it just lent itself really, really easily to the work I was already doing, which is photographing myself in my own interiors, and kind of working in like really small teams, which has really been key with DIY pandemic work, like being able to work from home by myself. So all of those factors made it so that it was like a really easy pitch for me. So for this one, it was kind of like we were going to be using different products and have kind of like different scenes for each product we're using. And this specific shoot was a video shoot, and that had some still elements included. So it was primarily a video campaign that I was working on, and then as well as some stills that are going to be used on their Instagram and promotion and stuff like that. So I literally for this project pitched with pictures from my personal project Puberty, and so it was really handy because I was able to show the client exactly like, this is the exact location I'm using, this is the lighting I have available, this is what I'm going to be wearing. So it makes it super easy for them to visualize it, which I love because I'm not really good at like drawing or anything like that. So I like being able to be like, look, this is what you're getting. And then we'll see like the photo at the end is, that's the photo I ended up with. And I'm really happy with it. I love it. It's had a good run. And for projects like this, I always like to keep the copyright as well, which is something I want to mention, because like brands will kind of like try to push you into like giving up the copyright. And like sometimes I will do it for work for hire if it's not super relevant to my work. But when it's things like this, I always try to specifically give them like a sub license that's limited to a certain, thing, like whether it's a certain time or a certain platform or whatever, and then so that I can continue publishing it on my own as well. So this was also published in the Washington Post, and it's right now in an exhibit for Photoville on the Brooklyn Bridge. And then it's going to be in my pre-beauty book as well. So it's kind of like it serves as multi-purpose in that way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It makes a lot of sense too, trying to hold on to the copyright. You wouldn't want something that looks like that is very much your personal work out there as, for sale elsewhere or being repurposed.
It always depends. Like obviously there's ways, sometimes you can't get around to it, but when I can try to keep it.
Yeah. So Kelsey, I've got a couple of slides here from your campaign for PAX. How did you figure out how to start writing treatments?
Just kind of had to do it. I just did how you make a photo treatment, and I saw some examples online. because I also didn't learn about it in school at all. We didn't talk about like a lot of very relevant things towards the end. So yeah, I just start with like explain like a paragraph normally about the project. And I mentioned my cat in this one because like now that everything is like Zoom meetings at home, my cat is always like jumping on top of my desk and he's like in the camera. But yeah, and then I put like relevant previous work that I feel like is kind of like how I would light it or kind of style it or something. So and I love drawing, so I just like try to draw every single shot, even if they don't care for me to draw it. It just helps me like think of how I'm going to build a set and what's going to go into the shot, and like it's a good way of working with any stylist because you can be like, this is what I need exactly. So this was just like pictures of every single actual prop we had, because this was the first job I did like in shutdown stuff where it was like the client won't be there and they can't be making choices. So it had to be like very explicit and like, you know, these are the materials that I'm going to have and going to use. So.
Yeah, and we can see how they turned out here.
Yeah, so I tried to keep it very close to the sketch. But obviously you kind of move around from there. But a good starting point for just like how you're going to build the set.
And I noticed when you, I noticed in your introduction on that first slide to the treatment, you mentioned, I think you're referencing your creative call with the client. So kind of on this whole subject of treatments and creative calls, how did you start to figure out, like, when you went into your first creative calls, did you have any sense of how to go about it, how to talk about the work? Or is that just kind of something you learn on the fly?
Yeah, it's just kind of something I think you learn on the fly. Like I don't, like, I'm not the type of person that can like pretend to be one way. Like I just kind of am how I am. I like can't pretend to be like super excited and like, I don't know. Like sometimes people will like expect you to have this different energy, but I feel better like just being myself on them, and like, you know, they're approaching you because they like your work, and if this is how you work, then they're probably going to be okay with it. So that's the way I think of it.
Laurence, I was curious if it's been on the creative call side, like actually talking through how you're going to produce the work in a way that like makes sense to people who are used to producing advertising. Has that ever been a challenge? I'm just thinking like almost purely in like production value stuff. Being able to talk about that when the work that you're producing is very much fine artwork, and I don't know how akin that work is to what you would get on a set, you know, like a advertising set.
Yeah, it honestly hasn't been an issue, and I feel like there's been a big shift in advertising in recent years that's kind of shifted towards this like less staged, you know, way of working, and so I think my work lends itself easily to that. And yeah, I don't know. I think just also the fact that I live in Montreal, so even before the pandemic, a lot of the work that I was doing was remote work, and so the client like wouldn't necessarily be here unless I'm shooting for someone locally, and so I've always just had to kind of explain like this is what I'm doing and just hope that they trust me. Just kind of go for it. But yeah, I don't know. I think that was like something I had fears of in school specifically. It was like, oh, my work doesn't like look like the typical commercial work, especially because I don't use lighting very much other than ambient light. But I do think there's been a big shift towards wanting different types of, you know, there's different places for different types of commercial photography. So yeah, it's been good.
That's great. Okay, so we'd love to take some questions. I know we're running over a little bit. I'm going to maybe take about 10 minutes here to try and get through some of the questions that we've been getting. And maybe Cheyenne, I'll start with a question here from Gaspar Marquez. And he's asking about, you know, your decision to kind of start, when you were working as a PA, your decision to start putting work out there and making connections and things like that. How did you decide when it was time to do that? And how did you start making those connections?
Well, it was kind of relentless. Instagram, I started using that quite a bit to just put work out there. But because like a lot of my work is celebrity and that's how it's been driven, I made like a friend of mine would be doing some MTV job or a BET job. And then they had certain celebrities there and they're like, oh, actually, would you mind, like, you've got your camera, can you take some photos? And it started in that world. And just relentlessly putting it out, at least on Instagram, because I remember like Ernie Montero from Inc. magazine, first assignment she ever hired me for, every recommendation, every mood thing that she sent me was screenshots of my Instagram. And then it was just a friend of mine, Jesse, was kind enough to put my work in front of Ronnie Weil at Wall Street Journal, and Ronnie started calling me for things. So it's a mixture of luck and just being tenacious, constantly putting it out there until someone finally is like, yeah, I like it. Let's give you a chance on this.
Great. So there's a question from Delaney Brown, and it's maybe Kelsey, we'll start with you because you mentioned your rep earlier. But Laurence, I know you mentioned having an agency that you're working with as well. So Kelsey, maybe you can start and just what made you decide to seek out a rep? Like at what point in your career did it feel like it was the right time to try and have that sort of relationship?
I actually kind of fell into it. I got really lucky. I won Young Guns 2 years ago. And one winner of Young Guns gets representation with Levin and Levitt. They're like partners with the One Club. So they rep a new artist every year, just to kind of like show them the ropes of how working with ad agencies works. So yeah, I won that, I guess. So I've been with them ever since. And
so had you been seeking or thinking about representation at all before that happened?
Not really. Like I definitely been feeling like I really needed help because I was like, I don't know how you're supposed to figure out any of this. I was just asking like my peers, like other photographers I know, like how they price things and how they work with producers on things. Like I'd already worked with producers, so I kind of knew how that side worked. But like pricing and like how usage works and like, you know, time limits on things is all like, I had no idea. So yeah.
And Cheyenne, do you have representation right now?
I had representation and then I left because it was mainly coming directly to me.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. And Laurence, how did you develop the relationship that you have? Are you working with an agency that works with like a lot of different photographers? Like it sounds like it's an advertising agency, yeah?
Yeah, it's an advertising agency. It's like a think tank, I guess. They have like they have photographers that they represent, and then sometimes if they have a specific project, they might reach out to like other members of the community. And yeah, they reached out to me, I think back in 2016 or 2014, a while ago, and they were just starting out, and I was very reticent to work with them because they were just starting out. And for about a year or two, I was kind of like, I'm not super interested. And they just kept reaching out to me. And then eventually I was like, okay, I'll try it out. And it's been really great. And they're super, super good at what they do. I'm looking for representation more in the like editorial and fine art world now to kind of have a balance of both. But yeah, it's been great. But I do get, some of my work on my own. And then if it's a big brand, I'll reach out to my agency and kind of loop them in, and so that they can negotiate rates for me and stuff like that. But yeah.
So a couple of people asked about this, and I've been curious myself, and it's just, how do you go about figuring out who, like the clients you want to connect with, and like how much of work comes from you being proactive and reaching out to people, sending them promos and things like that, versus them finding you sort of passively, I guess, on social media. So maybe Cheyenne, you can start with that one because you're not on mute.
It's just sorry, is how much of it is proactive and versus how much of it is them finding you?
Yeah, sorry, I asked two questions. Actually, start with how do you find people that you want to be proactive in reaching out to? Like, how do you find clients that you want to work for?
With Editorial World, it was relentlessly sending it out through, like, I would hold on to all my call sheets back when I was an assistant, you know what I mean? And be like, oh, hey, like, I do know this person. Or on Instagram, putting it out there, and every now and then, like, DMing the photo editor that follows you and being like, hey, like, love your stuff, like, would love to work with you. When it comes to advertising work, like I recently did a Nike job, no Nike, it was an AT&T campaign. It was all portraits. They came to me because the main subject, the spokesperson, I photographed her multiple times, and she started requesting me. So it's been a lot of that when it comes to advertising for me. It's been other people finding me and reaching out. But now that I've got a few of these like ad agency people, I just send them new work. Like whenever something new comes out that we like, you send out a mass email to everyone and be like, check it out. Hopefully you hire me.
Laurence, how about you? Are you pretty proactive about finding people and reaching out to them, or?
Not really, honestly. I mostly, I think I'm very proactive in maintaining my web presence and updating my Instagram, updating my website. I'm getting better at also doing what Cheyenne said of kind of emailing editors or emailing, agencies or whatever, whenever I do have work updates. But I think for me, the proactive part is more in like self-publishing and sharing my work and just kind of like getting it out there and like kind of nurture whatever connections come out of that.
Kelsey, how about you?
Yeah, for editorial, it always felt a lot easier because it's like easier to find a person's name with their position, and like they just feel more reachable and real. But with like ads, it's a little harder because it's like all these agencies that have clients that you don't know that the agencies have that client, and like it's kind of this like bigger hidden world where like just people are harder to access. So that's why having representation has been really helpful, because they do have those connections that they've had for like 20 years. So that kind of work comes through them, because I think a lot of times like bigger clients like that, they aren't as like knowledgeable all the time. Like more old school places aren't knowledgeable of like actual artists making work. They go to the agency who then like the ad agency who then has these like representative connections. So it's like just this chain of like, hey, who do you know, more than like them wanting somebody directly. So it's a little harder, I think, to figure out. But there's definitely brands that I would love to shoot for, but I have no idea how to access them. So you just hope they see your Instagram or something.
Well, I have a ton more questions, so I could bother you for another hour or so, but I'm not going to do that. Thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk through your work. Like I said, the 30photographers.com, the gallery is published. There's actually a lot in there that you can learn from if you just read the profiles of the photographers, people talking about how they've done things earlier in their careers. So I would definitely encourage you to go check that out.